Hi, everyone. My name is Newsha Ajami. I'm the Chief Development Officer for Research at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs Earth and Environmental Sciences area. And it is my pleasure to join you this evening, Berlin time, to share some thoughts on the transition of the water sector and how AI and digital solutions can help us be more effective in this transition process. I'm joining you from California. It's morning time here, so unfortunately I wasn't able to join the entire conference. However, I was able to catch some of the sessions and breakouts and found them to be quite inspiring and very interesting and relevant to what I'm going to talk about. So what we're talking today about, as I said, is going to talk about like how we can harness the digital revolution to build a water sector for a future. And as many of you know, we live in a world that is defined by our 19th century laws, 20th century infrastructure, and 21st century water challenges. The one-stream system that we built during the last century was quite effective. It was a linear system that brought water to communities. People used it once, and we captured that water and then treated it and put it back to the environment. It was quite effective to enable us to achieve growth, social and economic growth, and help us to basically build assets that have lasted for many years. However, this one-stream water infrastructure model that we developed over the past century, which is combined with siloed and fragmented governance structure, has created an inflexible system incapable of withstanding various social and environmental crises. I should also say I was asked to not use PowerPoint presentation, which is actually quite a delight to not have them because it provides a different platform to share ideas. So as one of the features of this system that we all depend on is that we put water in three different major buckets: people who brought water to us, people who took the water away as a wastewater, and utilities or people who actually dealt with stormwater and flood management. So these three buckets are the fragmentation I'm discussing in this session, as well as fragmentation across local, regional, and different scale of the management that we are dealing with. Climate change, for one, has been undermining basically the system that we depend on, the resiliency and reliability of our daily activities and how water is delivered to us or taken away, from extreme droughts, sea level rise, devastating storms, floods, mega fires in across Europe, in the US, and other parts of the world. They all have been sort of impacting our water infrastructure system and basically adding increasing pressure to these systems. And in many cases, these systems do not have the capacity to handle the cascading and compounding risks that are put upon them due to these emerging challenges we are facing in the 21st century. Basically, however, focusing on marginal changes that we often focus on trying to improve the system as is, sort of have proven to be not necessarily that effective. If we don't look at the shortcomings of the systems that we have, we actually can perpetuate status quo and cause more problems as we are dealing with the future. Just think about some of the challenges we have faced in recent years. We all coming out of a COVID-19 pandemic. We have been dealing with a lot of other climatic and health issues across the world, and some of the socioeconomic events that are impacting our water system in different ways. Think about, we in the US especially, we have been dealing with failing infrastructure systems, failing water systems, partially due to some of the extremes that we have been experiencing, but some just because lack of proper operation and maintenance over the years or lack of investments. So what is clear to us today is that facing today's challenges with yesterday's solutions are not going to get us anywhere. There is an opportunity to forge a new path, a new set of, and embrace new set of solutions to build a climate resilient water future. And according to the United Nations, we have 70% of the world is going to be living in urban areas by 2050, and 60% of those communities and cities have not yet been built. And that by itself is a bright, shining opportunity ahead of us to rethink and reimagine how we build a futuristic water system that is much less reliant or puts much less pressure on the environment, and actually it doesn't perpetuate waste and a mindless consumption the way the current system is enabling. As we are thinking about this transition to this 21st century infrastructure model, we actually not necessarily lacking solutions. We lack some of the governance and financing infrastructure that we need to enable this transition. So let me sort of paint how this futuristic water system is going to look like. And some of you already are forging these changes in different ways, in different areas. We, in the previous breakout sessions, there was a lot of discussions around data, information technology, better sewer management, better water management, using digital solutions. So the way I see the 21st century urban water infrastructure model is it's a lot of distributed and decentralized solutions that would bring in flexibility, resiliency, reliability to our existing rigid and once true system. So think about, for example, different technologies that can help us to reuse and recycle water at every scale, incorporating more conservation efficiency, leak detection, using green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. All of those are gradually being implemented across different already built cities, and actually can be a foundational solutions that should be considered for new upcoming cities that are being built. Basically, from that linear model that we had, we are gradually breaking path and transitioning into the circularity at different scale and trying to minimize the amount of water we need for every process. Right now in San Francisco, for example, we have buildings that are taking water from various parts of the building and cleaning it up and reusing it for different purposes, from toilet flushing to watering outdoor spaces. It basically creates that circularity on a small scale, on a building scale. And just you can expand that to all the way to city scale to use and reuse water multiple times, therefore reduce the amount of water we are taking out of the environment and reducing the amount of water we are putting back in the environment as a waste. As you're imagining this sort of new infrastructure model, there are four things I would like to highlight that I think it's important for us to focus in this transition. As I said, governance is one of those. However, like one most important part of that governance transition is to rethink what do we define as an infrastructure. Often, if I ask you what is a water infrastructure,
she's frozen for me.
Can you not hear me? I'm good. Okay, perfect. So the question is, what is an infrastructure? The boundaries of water infrastructure actually has been changing as we have been embracing various water reuse systems from building scale to regional scale, transforming the conventional once truth model that we have, water use network that we have. think about, as I said, green infrastructure, nature-based solutions. All these things are coming in to enable us to harness every drop of water, prevent pollution, protect our water sources, recharge groundwater, constructing wetlands to deal with sea level rise and flooding, permeable pavements, living riverbanks. All these things are being embraced as different solutions in this new world that we are charting and building. And basically providing us an opportunity to be more climate resilient and adapt to some of the challenges that we are facing due to climate change, managing both too much water and too little water while we're providing multiple other ancillary benefits. So what does that mean is we are thinking about roads, not just roads that you're driving on, but actually an opportunity to capture water, which means that you are not thinking about water infrastructure it's sort of expanding its boundaries to go beyond a normal stormwater system to actually using every road, every garden as a water capture system. So this is great. These new solutions are basically expanding some of the conventional water infrastructure models that we have been sort of considering, and they're and to be able to manage them, it's essential to think about information technology and decision support tools that we need to manage all these different pieces, all this new infrastructure in concert, in coordination among each other. Which brings me to the point that we also need to expand our infrastructure boundary to think about digital solutions and data and information technology as infrastructure. I call them basically soft infrastructure, things that we don't often invest in, but we have to. There was a comment actually in a breakout session on the fact that we have to actually think about how utilities and new startups that are dealing with digital water have to interact with each other. And I think that fits beautifully into this because in a way we have to rethink and reimagine how we work with data and information and where does it come in and how do we invest in it. And basically our investment strategy has to be a lot more all-encompassing to capture all these new boundaries that we are sort of charting and expanding on and embracing some of these solutions as part of the broader infrastructure network. The second thing to think about is basically where the role of demand as part of building future infrastructure. Often when you talk to utilities, they tell you demand is related to population as population and economic growth, as population grows and people are socioeconomically moving up the ladder, they're going to use more water. A lot of the work that we have done in my team, we have looked at water demand and water demand trends in the US, in the Western US, across the world. And what we have found is that actually that trend that everybody anticipates in utilities is not necessarily true. What we see is water demand is much more dynamic. People actually, and it's actually decoupled from population growth, and data and digital solutions can help us to unfold this trend that we right now not fully comprehend. Why is that important? Because if there isn't enough demand for water, we have to rethink and reimagine what infrastructure are we investing in. And as you can imagine, there are two different paths we can take depending on what kind of demand we are going to meet in the future. Often people think, as I said, not only the socioeconomics, but also climate or demographics can impact water demand. And what we have found is actually demand is much more flexible. Utilities, as people are going to consider reuse and recycling at various scales, for example, house scale, building scale, neighborhood scale, demand on water, the centralized system is going to drop. Think about solar panels on people's roofs versus solar farms. They sort of one is sort of reducing demand at the source, at the sort of point of consumption, and the other one is producing electrons that people can use. Very similar trend is happening in the water sector. People are incorporating some of these reuse solutions at a smaller scale is actually impacting demand. So we have to consider that as part of how future cities are going to look like. And basically, utilities are not going to be the only actors that are providing and generating or providing or distributing water among people, but customers are also going to become water producers. I call them prosumers. They're producing and consuming at the same time because they are not going to all go off the grid, but they still depend on some of the water that comes from the centralized system. And and we need, in order for us to know where, when, and how much water do we need, we need to have a much better data and information technology to be able to sort of put these hybrid systems together and be able to manage them and better understand how demand trends are changing, considering not only conservation and efficiency, not only leak detection, but also how these transition from centralized to decentralized solutions is going to impact demand in the long run. The third thing I would like to focus on is basically harnessing the digital revolution to build a resilient water infrastructure network, which sort of transitions from what I mentioned about demand and how we are going to embrace that. Basically, to achieve this water resilience under climate change, we actually really have to embrace a portfolio of water solutions that are focusing on local, regional opportunities, as I mentioned. As part of this process, there is a need to keep a system-level perspective, being able to understand how the system is changing, how various parts of the system is transitioning, and what does that mean to our centralized system. As we are putting these centralized and decentralized solutions together, like pieces of puzzle, we are building this new hybrid model. It's not fully centralized, it's not fully decentralized, but actually it's a combination of both, and they have to be able to be managed in a coordinated way if we wanted to make sure we know how the water pressure in our pipes are not going to be impacted, how the water quality is not going to be impacted based on a point of views and who is taking water, who is not. So it is really important to kind of basically embrace some of these solutions, digital solutions, to enable us to transition as we are considering these hybrid infrastructure models that is sort of coming to us in different ways. A new generation of decision support tools are needed in order to making this transition smooth. We also need to consider trading mechanisms that enables people to try to generate water in different locations and basically trade water in different ways. Potentially, we have to think about how we can build a financial tools that enables this transition. Those financial models and financial tools will be fueled by some of our newfound digital capacity if we know where, how much, and how, where, and how. In how much water do we need, and we actually have a stronger accounting mechanism around our water, we can do a better job of making sure we are not overproducing or under-generating water and under-delivering or over-delivering water. So these new data sources and digital platforms can help our water utilities to better understand, manage long-term water demand trends, as I mentioned, develop target demand planning processes. Ultimately, the goal should be to avoid stranded assets, to avoid building centralized major solutions that might not have demand for them. And basically, when we can achieve reliability through small and distributed and modular and adaptive solutions, we actually should embrace those, because that's how the future is going to be: modular and distributed rather than centralized. And and solutions that are driven mostly by economy of scale. The last point I would like to make on this is basically harnessing the interlinks across sectors and rethinking business model. One of the reasons that we are having problems embracing some of these ideas, I mean, these ideas, again, as many have been showcasing all day long, you see a lot of people, and a lot of solutions are out there, digital solutions that can be taken in any day and be incorporated in our existing water infrastructure system. Why aren't they being picked up? In addition to the governance structure I mentioned and the limited systems that we have in embracing limited space that we have, not necessarily space in a sense of we don't have any locations, but the fact that the model that we have is not working. Basically the reality is a lot of utilities have a business model that does not lend itself to these distributed solutions. They have financial models that promotes or makes it easier for solutions that are centralized to be embraced. It's easier for them to be centralized because that's what they know and that's how their financial models are set up, or rates that is not conventionally assumed to be an infrastructure, means that you have to rethink and reimagine how you manage your system as a whole. So using infrastructure interconnections and basically vulnerabilities can, in a way, help us to transition to a more climate resilient water future. However, requires us to embrace a very different business model that basically, for example, helps us to better promote one water movement that's becoming a big issue around the world, and a lot of discussions around how we can overcome some of the fragmentations we have created, basically thinking about drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater sectors as one feeding to the other, into the other, and basically highlighting opportunities for bridging some of these infrastructure boundaries that we have created over the years, and be able to harness some of the opportunities there across various sectors. Basically, think about it: recovering energy from wastewater, using parking lots that capture stormwater, using green infrastructure to improve social well-being. What does that even mean? How do you measure that? Thinking about transportation experience. If the roads are basically a way to capture stormwater, what does it mean? Who's going to pay for that road pavement? Is this water utilities job? Is this the transportation utilities job? So these interlinks needs to be basically worked on to make sure that we can all collectively invest in our future infrastructure. And some of these interconnections are fully in display when you are thinking about some of the extreme events that we have been experiencing, for example, in the US. When you think about the connection between water and energy, we have been dealing with a lot of different communities that have been, have lost power, therefore have lost their water because there have been no power to distribute the water. Or the other way around, there was no water, so you can't actually extract energy. So there's a lot of interlinks that is not very well harnessed. So it is imperative to remember that these interconnections, while debating how to build future cities and where to spend our money, we need to think about these interconnections as an opportunity areas. So in order to not perpetuate the existing business model that we have, also thinking about rates and how we set these rates, the fact that a lot of these utilities are comfortable to have centralized system and charge people for the amount of water they use. What does that mean to them if people are going partially off the grid, or becoming prosumers, or generating water on the ground themselves as they're embracing reuse at different scales? Does the utility need to rethink the rate setting process? How are they going to charge these people? That part of the business model is going to make or break some of these utilities and how they can function in the future. Ultimately, we have to basically be able to think about business model that today's water sector depends on, rethink it, and basically realize some of the outdated parameters that it has, and basically, unless we can rethink that, this outdated system, we are not going to be able to weather some of the challenges we are facing today. So let alone basically galvanizing how we are going to enable paradigm shift and build the future. So that business model is going to be a key part of rethinking and reimagining how we are going to transition in the water sector. So just going to close by reiterating the 4 points I had. One, we have to embrace some of the digital solutions that we have to build a smart grid that can track distributed production and consumption of the water. Where, when, and how much water do we need? The second thing is in this 21st century hybrid smart urban water infrastructure model, we have to rethink what do we mean by infrastructure. More than hard physical infrastructure that we are so used to investing in, we have to think about soft infrastructure, data, decision support tools, IT system, smart meters, different sort of solutions that can enable us to better track water, and we have to be able to invest in those, and the model that we need to invest in those is going to look very different from our conventional model. The fourth thing is what kind of think about cross-sectoral and multi-benefit solutions and how they can be fitting into our existing infrastructure model and how they're going to transform our cities, and try to harness the interconnection between different sectors and how these different solutions, while might not be providing like an engineered solution, a very specific set of outcomes that we are used to measure, they actually can provide a broader set of benefits, but we have to install many of them in different parts and be able to aggregate these results, aggregate these benefits. So rethinking how we measure the performance of these solutions are going to be key. And the last thing is we need to rethink business model of our water utilities. From a centralized, once true linear system to circular, data-driven, and customer-centric. And ultimately, unless we make this a central part of our business, our water utilities of the future, some of these water utilities are not going to be able to weather some of these transitions we are experiencing. Because we want it or not, this is happening. Cities across the world are embracing these solutions. So ultimately, it's basically going with the flow and trying to transition, or staying back and fighting this change and eventually not being able to transition in the right place and in the right time. And with that, I'll just close with saying Albert Einstein, one of his main quotes that I love to always go back to is, he always says, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. That's what we have to think about when we are thinking about the water sector and how we need to enable it to transition in a futuristic way. Thank you. And back to you,
Thank
Jennifer.
you so much, Dr. Newsha Ajami. Thank you so much for that final keynote, giving us a good look at some of the ways that we can go in the future when we look at artificial intelligence and reshaping the global water industry. I think that's it. Congratulations to everyone here who has worked so hard to make this year's Blue Planet Berlin Water Dialogues Conference such a success. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, to our keynote speakers, to the hardworking people at Eclarium, at the German Water Partnership, at KWB, and at T-Base who helped produce this event for all of you joining us from around the world. Special thanks also to the Berlin Senate Department for Economics, Energy, and Public Enterprises, and the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection. Thanks to all of you so much for joining us. It has been such a fascinating conference. I hope that the conversation can continue online. Don't forget, if you're looking to see some of those breakout sessions, you can find those online on YouTube and on our website. And thank you so much for participating in this year's Blue Planet Berlin Water Dialogues. Have a lovely rest of your day.